Thank you. We now move to topical questions. Question number 1, Richard Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it plans to delay the tendering process for the Clyde and Hebrides ferry services.
Minister Keith Brown.
The Scottish Government is absolutely committed to supporting our island communities, and we are continuing to invest millions of pounds in new cutting-edge ferries, ports and harbours fit for the 21st century. And as I said in my statement on the 5th of September to the Chamber, on the subject of ferries to Orkney, our next challenge is the replacement of the contract for the Clyde and Hebrides ferry services, which expires in October next year. We will be announcing our plans for the procurement of the next contract soon. No final decisions have been made regarding the Clyde and Hebridean ferry services tender.
Richard Baker.
I thank the Minister for his answer, but I'm not entirely clear on the point still. RMT officials have been told the process has been delayed by 3 years. Transport Scotland have pointedly not denied that. Is it the Minister's intention to delay the tendering process for these vital routes by 3 years?
Minister.
I think I've just explained that no final decisions have been made regarding the Clyde and Hebridean ferry services, and I can't be held to account for statements made by the RMT. I have said previously, as a member well knows, that we do feel that the contract length for all of these tenders for ferry services is too short. We made that known to the European Union previously when I met with the European Commission in Brussels. But as of yet, there is no final decision taken regarding the Clyde and Hebridean ferry services.
Richard Baker.
Surely it's important that Parliament's informed first of when the procurement process will take place. Will the Minister give that guarantee, and will he also guarantee that whenever the procurement process does finally take place, that the recently given commitment by the First Minister not to debundle the routes for these services will still apply?
Minister.
Well, I have to say, first of all, that's not what the First Minister said. He said that we have no plans to unbundle the routes, and also that no case had been made for unbundling. I think that gives a fairly strong indication of the Government's thinking. But of course it's right that Parliament should be told first, as well as the communities most affected by these services, and of course that's what we'll do.
Dave Thompson.
Yes, Minister. Calmac is an excellent public service provider which has a very special place in the hearts of Hebrideans, and we must do all we can to ensure its success as a company. Can the Minister therefore assure the Parliament that Calmac, our own company after all, is doing everything it can to improve efficiency whilst maintaining the high level of service expected by the travelling public, so that it is in the best possible position to win the West Coast ferry contract whenever that comes?
Minister.
Well, of course, the tendering process has to be an open and fair process. We're obliged to do nothing but that, so we have to bear that in mind. But it's also true to say, as the First Minister said recently, that we do, as the member says, enjoy a fantastic service from the people that provide the services at Calmac right across the whole of Scotland. It was obviously something of a shock to the system for Calmac in relation to the Northlink ferries. I know from having spoken to Calmac that they have learned lessons from that, lessons which they intend to apply to their application for the Clyde and Hebridean ferry services. But just to point out, if I can, that Calmac are also working to the October 2013 deadline, but they are working very hard to make sure that they are successful in relation to the next contract.
Alex Johnson.
Can the Minister reinforce his guarantee that this open and fair tendering process will be adequate to accommodate the potential for bids from some of Scotland's successful small ferry companies who would like to become bigger in service of the Clyde and Hebrides area?
Minister.
That point is a point that's been made by the member before, and also by Mike Russell and others with an interest in these matters. And of course we'll look at all these issues when we go out to tender. But I can guarantee the member it will be a fair and transparent bidding process.
Question number 2, Colin Keir.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made by the Halls of Broxburn Task Force in relation to the company's future.
Minister. Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
So the Scottish Government remains committed to ensuring there is a positive future for the plant and its workforce at Halls of Broxburn. The Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service has been working closely with the company and have identified savings of around £4 million. These savings, along with other energy efficiency and sales and marketing measures, could significantly improve the financial performance of Halls. Regular liaison has been established with key supermarkets to ensure business continuity during this process at Halls of Broxburn. Along with the leader of West Lothian Council, Councillor John McGuinty, I met with Peter Beckers, the Chief Operating Officer of Vion International in Edinburgh on the 7th of September. I put a proposal to Mr Beckers that would see the Scottish Government working with West Lothian Council and Scottish Enterprise, purchasing and leasing back the Halls site on a commercial basis, enabling significant capital investment to be made at Halls. Vion have unfortunately declined to take up the offer. The Manufacturing Advisory Service are continuing with their work on site, and the company will continue dialogue with any interested buyers. As I understand it, there has been a further expression of interest in Halls in recent days. The Government stands ready to engage with all interested parties. Over the next few weeks, the Partnership Action for Continuing Employment will continue to deliver presentations to all 1,700 staff in collaboration with Sales Development Scotland and Job Centre Plus.
Colin Keir.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with Vion's decision not to accept the Government's substantial offer is extremely disappointing? And although the factory isn't Fiona Hislop's constituency, it is a very short distance from my own in Edinburgh Western, and I'm concerned about potential job losses in the area. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary whether the Government would be open to alternative bids if the company came forward and was willing to accept the Government's offer?
Cabinet Secretary.
What I would stress to Mr Kerr, and I make this point very publicly, is that the Government stands ready to provide assistance where we can to support continuity of employment at Halls of Broxburn. The employees at Halls of Broxburn are predominantly resident in the area adjacent to the Broxburn site, with a concentration of employment that is quite unusual given the degree of labour mobility that exists within our society today. Therefore, the economic impact on a very specific labour market in West Lothian would be significant if the plant were to close. I certainly will be. I have already met with one of the groups of bidders personally. My office and my officials have talked to two others, making 3 interested parties at this stage, and the Government will be only too prepared to advance dialogue with those parties to find if there is a way in which we can maintain employment at the Halls of Broxburn site.
Mr Keir.
I welcome the fact that the Government is pursuing talks with bidders, but can the Cabinet Secretary provide an assurance that everything will be done to stand by the employees in the event of a future operator cannot be found?
Cabinet Secretary.
This is a very difficult process because at this moment we have to be concentrating on essentially 2 particular outcomes. One is finding an alternative bidder, and the Government and our agencies will engage in active dialogue to ensure that we can identify an alternative bidder and we can put together the type of proposition that makes investment in Halls of Broxburn an attractive proposition to other parties and other interested individuals. The other side of the work must be to focus on the interests of the employees of the plant, who are clearly going through a very, very uncertain time. And the officials from Skills Development Scotland and Job Centre Plus are actively involved in site. Vion have been entirely cooperative in this process, so there is advice available through the 2 agencies, one responsible to United Kingdom Government Ministers, one responsible to ministers here, both of them working together on site to provide the support that individual employees will require. So whilst we wish to avoid any closure of the plant or large-scale job losses at the plant, we are ensuring that members of staff are given the advice that they need at what is clearly a very uncertain time for them.
Neil Findlay.
Presiding Officer, I would like to put on record my very genuine thanks to the Finance Secretary and the Labour Leader of West Lothian Council, John McGuinty, for their joint efforts in their innovative plan to try and secure the Hull site. In rejecting the proposal, it now seems clear that the biggest obstacle to saving the plant are the owner's view on themselves. What further encouragement can the Finance Secretary give to prospective parties with an interest in buying the site and to the workers who work there?
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, President Officer, could I welcome Mr Finlay's remarks? And I think in this whole process, the Government has been able to work very effectively with West Lothian Council and with other stakeholders throughout the process in our agencies, and also parliamentary representatives, both my colleague Fiona Hislop and also Graham Morris, the MP for the constituency, both of whom have been a tremendous support to the task force, and Mr Finlay in supporting Mr Morris into the bargain. The key to resolving the issues here essentially lies in the combination of the ability to excite and interest bidders in the plant, and also Vion being prepared to be part of that solution. And one of the points that I would make is that clearly Vion will have to incur very significant cost to close this plant. I estimate that to be in the order of £17 to £25 million. Now, essentially, I view that to be a pretty negative cost, but if some of that cost could be avoided or it could be reinvested if there was to be a managed and orderly transfer of responsibility, providing necessary assurance to the workforce about their future to a third party. In that respect, the Government and our agencies, and if I may say so on behalf of West Lothian Council, would be very willing to be part of the brokerage of some form of solution in that respect. I think in a situation where clearly there will be cost to the public purse of the closure of Vion, clearly there will be undoubtedly an increase in benefit payments in that vicinity. Although that benefit doesn't arise to the Scottish Government avoiding that cost, it is important that we don't lose sight of that potential impact on the public finances and act to keep people in employment as much as we possibly can do. I should also place on record, Presiding Officer, the fact that we've had outstanding cooperation in the task force from the representatives of USDAW and also the non-union members of the workforce within Halls of Broxburn, and that's greatly assisted the process of making the progress that we have been able to make. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get to a concluded outcome at this stage.
Sheikh Brodie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the Cabinet Secretary's very, very clear direction in the previous answers, I wonder if I might ask the Scottish Government if Vion, the owners of Halls, is considering sale of the company as a whole, or will it consider selling off the various parts of the company as individual components?
Cabinet Secretary.
These really are issues for Vion to address. What I have made clear to Peter Beckers and also to Peter Barr, the UK chair of Vion, that the Scottish Government wishes to engage constructively and actively with the company. We don't underestimate the scale of the challenges that they face, and as a government we have been acting to support the business continuity at Halls of Broxburn, as I referred to in my opening answer to Mr Keir, with the Rural Affairs Secretary maintaining a regular dialogue with supermarkets and customers of Halls of Broxburn to assure them of the government's determination to deliver business continuity. So I think what I would want to say very clearly is that the government is keen to be as supportive as we possibly can do in resolving these issues for the benefit of the workforce of Halls of Broxburn, but for the wider benefit of the West Lothian and Scottish economies.
The next item of business is a statement by Derek Mackay on the National Planning Framework 3. The Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and there should therefore be no interventions or interruptions. And I'll give the Minister a few seconds to get himself settled. I call on Derek Mackay. Minister, you have 10 minutes.
Presiding Officer, this Government sees planning as a key component of delivering sustainable economic growth, with planning playing its full part in the finance, employment and sustainable growth portfolio geared towards contributing to the Scottish Government's purpose of delivering that sustainable growth. From the top-level strategic plan, the detail of the Scottish planning policy, to frontline implementation, our duty is to ensure the system moves forward and continues to make Scotland the best place to live, work and invest. Planning is a priority for this Government, and as we stated in our manifesto, a more efficient and effective planning system will be good for investment and growth. The Government's economic strategy, published in 2011, highlights the role our planning system has made. Today I want to announce 3 important areas of work to strengthen planning's contribution to increasing sustainable economic growth and to reflect on the progress already made in Scotland to drive forward improvements and efficiencies in our planning system. The 3 areas of work that I am announcing today are the review of the National Planning Framework, a review of the Scottish planning policy, and an update on the planning reform next steps package of measures set out in March. As I mentioned in my statement to Parliament on the 28th of March, work in the third National Planning Framework has begun. The NPF is a spatial strategy for Scotland's development over the next 20 to 30 years, and I want that future to be about ambition, about opportunity and about place. I said in March that I see these key themes of NPF 3 to be supporting economic recovery and to transition to a low-carbon economy. I remain of that view, but there are other broad objectives that must be remembered. These include creating jobs and supporting people, moving to zero waste and improving green infrastructure, adapting to climate change, improving connectivity through better transport links, energy networks and broadband. Today I have published our participation statement for NPF 3. This sets out how we will go about preparing the new National Planning Framework. In responding to the development of the second National Planning Framework, Parliament asked us to go further to ensure comprehensive and meaningful engagement for NPF 3, beginning early and sustaining participation throughout the process. The participation statement shows we have already started doing this. For example, we have consulted with a wide range of stakeholders to shape the engagement process, including community groups, business interests, professionals and public bodies, and I'd like to thank them for providing their thoughts, advice and their time. We will prepare a report on the main issues instead of preparing a detailed and full draft proposed framework, delivering a much more effective way of presenting different options and seeking views on them. In 2007, Cabinet Secretary John Swinney set out the criteria ministers would use to identify national developments for the current National Planning Framework. We consider that these criteria remain relevant, updating them to reflect the current circumstances and priorities, in particular our economic strategy. Proposals must make a significant contribution to sustainable economic growth. Proposals must be nationally significant, not just regional. In addition, national developments must also make a significant contribution to one or more of the following: job creation and skills development, our Climate Change Act and an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050, as well as adapting to or mitigating the effects of climate change, the Zero Waste Plan, the Scottish Government's renewable energy targets delivering jobs and investment, strengthening Scotland's links with the rest of the world, improving our digital, transport, energy, utilities or green infrastructure networks, or improving the quality of the built or natural environment where we live and work. We will use this criteria to assess all candidate national developments proposed to us and will identify those which we think should be designated as national developments in our main issues report to be published in spring 2013. There are 14 national developments currently identified in the second National Planning Framework, from the fourth replacement crossing to facilities and infrastructure related to the 2014 Commonwealth Games. We will consider whether each of these should remain as a national development in NPF 3. Some of them may not, for example, if they are already consented and on track for delivery. It is, however, likely that several existing national developments will be carried forward into NPF 3, but updated and modified as necessary. When the second National Planning Framework was being prepared, Parliament took a close interest, and rightly so, in the process for identifying those national developments. The Scottish Government has put in place improved consultation arrangements for finalising national developments and make more public information accessible on how we assess them. I intend to today call an issue for candidate national developments. I want, as far as possible, to hear about proposals for national developments as early as possible. This will enable us to properly assess projects from the outset so that we can have the best candidates going forward. We want to be open about the information we receive about all candidate national developments and about how we assess them. Therefore, we commit to publishing all the suggestions for national developments and the supporting information we receive, to publish our assessment matrix at the same time as the main issues report. Today, we also publish the scoping report for the Strategic Environmental Assessment for NPF 3. This is the first stage on the SEA process and will accompany other assessments on equalities, business and regulatory impact and carbon. The MPF is the spatial strategy that indicates where we want to see development in Scotland and which developments are national priorities. How that vision is delivered is the Scottish Planning Policy, the SPP. In 2010, we published the current SPP, which consolidated into a single policy 21 previous policy documents on individual topics such as housing, renewable energy and transport. It reduced our weight of planning policy by some 80%, down to just 55 pages from 400. Our planning policy is clearer and more proportionate as a result. Although the policies themselves were largely developed before the economic downturn and in a different planning culture, that consolidation has proven to be innovative and effective. Today I'm announcing a review of the Scottish planning policy to ensure that it remains fit for purpose and meets the challenges presented by the economic circumstances we now face. The SPP makes clear that sustainable economic growth is a material consideration and indicates that planning should proactively support growth-enhancing activities. This does not mean development at any cost. Protecting community and environmental benefits will continue to lie at the heart of our policies. Indeed, the government economic strategy is clear that the quality of Scotland's built and natural environment is vital to the success of the economy. The government economic strategy is also clear about the priority of developing good quality, sustainable places. We will therefore look to make place more central to the policy. In taking forward the review, I've set the Scottish Government a challenging timescale to complete the review and publish a revised SPP by the end of 2013. I've asked my officials to carry out the review of the SPP alongside the early stages of the review of the NPF. This means interested parties will be able to see the connections between the two. The 2006 Planning Act introduced the biggest changes to the Scottish planning system in a generation, and these changes have made a real difference. Our subsequent planning reform actions included completion of the e-planning programme, investment in practitioner training, service improvement plans from government planning authorities and our agencies, delivery of efficiencies in operation of the planning appeal system, and a more proportionate and earlier involvement in planning from agencies. It's worthwhile noting that last week our UK counterparts announced a series of amendments to reform of the English planning system. In Scotland, we have already gone a long way to address issues now being looked at south of the border. We have permanently increased permitted development rights for householders, reducing regulation, and are now taking forward more changes for non-householder developments. We have introduced measures that enable developers to revisit legal agreements where they have made developments unviable. We are addressing performance through a new performance framework developed by and with planning authorities and welcomed by many stakeholders. We are working with partners to improve handling of major applications through better use of processing agreements and initiatives such as planning protocol within enterprise areas. And we are working towards streamlining multiple consents so that the process ensures that appraisals and assessments are conducted without adding unnecessary financial burden and time delays to the planning process. We have a comprehensive, joined-up package of reforms in Scotland to tackle issues in the short and long term. My next step statement in March contained a package of measures that focused on ensuring a fitter, more streamlined planning system. A planning system that gives a higher priority to place than process. I would like to take this opportunity to update Parliament on those measures. We published the analysis reports on the planning reform next steps last week. I will begin to lay legislation shortly, which will simplify the regulatory burden for developers and planning authorities. We have worked with planning authorities on processing their development plans and exploring new ways of working. Recognising that this isn't just about legislation, we are working to improve culture, leadership and delivery. Positively, planning authorities already approve around 93% of applications. However, performance remains variable across the country and needs to improve. We want to see the process becoming more predictable and proportionate. Following the publication of the new planning performance framework in March, I'm looking forward to receiving the first annual reports this month covering the quality of services and commitment to future improvements. I've made clear that there will be a direct link between performance improvement and an increase in planning application fees, on which we have consulted, and I will confirm the way forward on this in the coming months. Making the system work more efficiently is not an end in itself. It is about supporting economic recovery, providing a supportive business environment and, importantly, promoting quality of place for people to live, work and enjoy.
The Minister will now take questions on issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around about 20 minutes. If members haven't already pressed their button, I'd ask them to do so now. And I call Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I thank the Minister for advance copy of his statement? Can I strongly agree with the National Planning Framework as being the opportunity to focus public and private sector investment on national priorities? So would the Minister agree with the RTPI's call for a review of progress with NPF 2 projects? It's important that we learn the lessons both of success and barriers to inform the delivery of NPF 3. We do need to focus on national development that will bring economic prosperity and put Scotland firmly on a low-carbon path. And it's instructive that expansion of both Glasgow and Edinburgh airports were key objectives in the last NPF, yet the rail links to these airports and investment in the Egypt have either been dumped or drastically reduced. So the Government talks the talk on jobs and green growth, but has failed to deliver on the ground. And in the context of strengthening our contacts with the rest of the world, the failure of SNP MPs even to turn up yesterday to debate the West Coast Mainline franchise calls into question the SNP's commitment to rail. If we're to deliver national developments, then we need big thinking, big investment and big decisions, Minister. And my criticism is that there's no sense of that from this document. Rather than a list of projects, don't we need to see NPF 3 develop into a coherent national physical plan which joins up government strategies and plans and gives us a vision of government strategies and so that leaders from every sector in Scotland can buy into that vision and work to deliver it?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thought that maybe the harmony that had developed between Sarah Boyack and myself would maybe continue with our opening question, because I would agree that we have lessons to learn in terms of the process around learning from NPF 2 and what can be transplanted and augmented in NPF 3, both by way of participation and how it involves. So too, there will be projects that can adapt. There is a monitoring arrangement for the work in NPF 2, which is reported to us, and we do consider that very closely. But we are setting an ambitious agenda for Scotland, and this national planning framework will certainly cut across all agendas and all strategies, whether it's a marine strategy or renewables or regeneration. Clearly, we want a joined-up and strategic approach to our ambitions for Scotland. But in terms of bigger and better, we could do even more if we had all the powers of an independent nation to realise the ambitions, that I'm sure members of the Labour Party would share. But with the tools we have, we will get on with delivering what I think is a very ambitious agenda.
Margaret Mitchell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and apologies for not being here for the very start of the Minister's statement. I thank the Minister for early sight of the statement. In the time available, I would like to look at the forthcoming review of the Scottish planning policy and to ask the Minister specifically what role, if any, he envisages the community benefit clauses having in the planning policy in terms of their ability to create jobs and to promote regeneration and sustainable growth. And I'm disappointed that further to the next step statement on the 28th of March, again, there has been no reference to the crucial role of enforcement within the planning system. Can the Minister give an assurance that this will be covered in the review, given that it's fundamental to the efficiency and effectiveness of any planning system?
Minister.
In terms of the question around how it would connect to other bills and other benefits, of course, economic benefit is a material consideration in any planning application, and each planning application should be judged on the merits of its case, so it would already be taken into account in terms of the planning function. What I want to do through the review of Scottish planning policy is to ensure that there is appropriate weighting on economic benefit and on economic development in any planning application and in the implementation of that policy. And it's appropriate that we should consult on that to ensure that we get the the maximum benefit that and get the policy right. And in terms of enforcement, the issues we're currently looking at is how we can ensure the planning system is fit for purpose and can adapt to the circumstances in which we now find ourselves. Of course, I remain interested in how individual planning authorities execute their regulatory and enforcement function. I'd be happy to have further talks around how you think that could be strengthened and take that opportunity forward. But this is ensuring the system is delivering and supporting the kind of development that we would all want to see.
Aileen McLeod, to be followed by Anne McTaggart.
Thanks very much, Presiding Officer. Can I also thank the Minister for his statement? Now, the National Planning Framework 2 Monitoring Report 2012 states that growth in renewable energy capacity is providing benefits in relation to climate change mitigation, but at the same time, landscape trends suggest that onshore wind is having cumulative effects on the character of upland areas, which may become increasingly significant in the coming years. Can I ask the Minister, what consideration is the Scottish Government giving to this issue in drawing up the third National Planning Framework?
Minister.
I can affirm that, Aileen McLeod, that the National Planning Framework Monitoring Report said, which was published in March, it concluded that wind farm development has not physically impinged on landscapes safeguarded by designations to any significant extent. But what we have been able to do is to produce guidance on the cumulative impact and cumulative effect, which is taken into consideration when any application is considered, and we have gone to great lengths to ensure that our environment is protected and that our renewables policy is delivered in a way that is sensitive to the local environment, and that work and that ongoing approach will be built into both our national policy and local policy as it applies in such determinations.
Anne McTaggart, followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank the Minister for an advance copy of his statement. Having read through the statement, I noticed there is no mention of a specific strategy for cities. Cities like Glasgow are the powerhouse of Scotland's economy, and while I'm pleased to see that the Minister has included the 2014 Commonwealth Games, the National Planning Framework is not about the next 2 years, but the next 20 years. With this in mind, what action will the Minister take to ensure there is specific city strategies included in the National Planning Framework 3, and what steps he will take to ensure a legacy of regeneration for Glasgow after the 2014 Games?
Minister.
The City of Glasgow clearly is a major driver in the Scottish economy, and that point is well made. But the Government has outlined a policy approach and new resources to support the cities both individually and collectively to ensure that through the city strategy there is greater effect from the cities working together. Now, of course, in the development opportunities that will be presented in the developments of a national scale, it will reflect on the place of cities within our strategy. But at this stage, as we move towards NPF 3, we look to the opportunities that exist across the cities, the towns and the villages in rural Scotland. But of course the cities will play a central part in that, as it already does in the Government's overarching economic strategy.
Kenneth Gibson, followed by Graham Day.
I welcome the Minister's statement. Can he confirm that the Scottish Government will actively consider removing any possibility of a coal-fired power station being built at Anderson from NFP3? He'll be aware that an application to build one generated 21,000 objections, more than any other application in Scottish planning history, and was subsequently withdrawn. Does he appreciate that while another application is unlikely, the possibility greatly concerns many of my constituents and the host of environmental groups across Scotland who fought against the previous unwanted proposal?
Minister.
I'm sure Mr Gibson wouldn't want me to prejudge the outcome of both the participation statement, the ongoing engagement and the process that I've outlined today. It is possible that projects identified within NPF2 may not progress to NPF3, but each case, each candidate project will be considered on its merits, and although they may not progress, we will engage in that, and whatever we do will be done in a very transparent and open way.
Graham Day, followed by John Pentland.
Thank you. Following on from the announcement in June that a national community planning group comprising all 32 community planning partnerships would be set up, can the Minister update Parliament on the progress being made by the group and outline the part it will play in taking forward the developments announced today?
Minister.
The National Community Plan Oversight Group has had a very productive first meeting. I think will assist in combining both spatial planning, as discussed today, with community planning itself. I think it has real potential to do that. The group will produce guidance and support and leadership in the way that we would expect to realise the ambitions that are outlined in today's strategy.
John Pentland, followed by Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I apologise for the Minister for being late? Last week we discussed the plan for a steelworkers' memorial at Ravenscraig, and I was pleased to see that support from government and opposition backbenchers, not just for the past but also for the future of Ravenscraig. Ravenscraig is Europe's largest brownfield site and gives the Scottish Government the opportunity to stimulate the economy of not just North Lanarkshire, not just Central Scotland, but Scotland as a whole. This year, you need to excuse me, Presiding Officer, I forgot my glasses. This year, NPF2 monitoring report notes that TIF will support the second phase of development of Ravenscraig, but it should be more than just a regional priority. So I call on the Minister to ensure NPF3 seizes this opportunity and moves beyond the TIF and regional status of Ravenscraig regeneration to become a substantial national development that will boost Scotland's economy with the development of European significance.
Minister, I see you've still got your glasses on.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So when Mr Pentland locates his glasses, I would encourage him to read this call for national candidate projects eagerly, and I'm sure he can assist his local authority in progressing with Ravenscraig in a way that could transform it into the kind of project he aspires to. And I'll outline again, for the benefit of the member, that whatever we propose will be decided along an assessment matrix that is published, that has participation and involvement in every priority. Every project will be fully considered. And I know that Ravenscraig project is very close to the member's heart. And in addition to the range of supports that the Scottish Government has delivered for that particular initiative, I'm sure he can compose with partners a case which can ensure it gets the priority that it deserves.
Kevin Stewart, to be followed by Tavish Scott.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Minister for his statement. Can I ask the Minister how the planning process can be further streamlined to ensure that decisions concerning key strategic infrastructure projects can be progressed more efficiently in light of cases such as the Aberdeen Western Peripheral Route in the North East, a project which has been subject to huge delays as a result of legal challenges?
Minister.
The member may be aware that through our ongoing planning reforms, we want to remove processes that add little value to the decision-making in terms of planning, and sometimes interventions, however justified, can be frustrating. In relation to the case he makes, he will also be aware of Lord Gill's recent work, Scottish Civil Courts Review, which made a number of recommendations in relation to public interest litigation, looking at things like judicial review procedures, time limits and case management by the courts. So we are now preparing legislative proposals for civil courts reform with a view to a public consultation by the end of the year.
Tavish Scott, followed by Jamie Hepburn.
Presiding Officer, can I thank the Minister for his statement. Would you be able to inform Parliament as to, on the National Planning Framework, whether Parliament will be able to adjust or amend that National Planning Framework when it comes forward, given the lack of detail that he's already mentioned here today? On planning fees, he mentioned those in his statement. Is his policy objective full cost recovery, or is he planning to cap planning fees according to the size of the development? And I'd be grateful for some detail on that. And finally, Presiding Officer, on his strategic environment assessment paper, which he published today with his statement, he will be aware that there are 80 separate key environmental objectives in that SEA document. Can he tell Parliament what he expects developers to do in respect of SEA when they face the potential of having to deal with those 80 separate environmental objectives?
Minister.
On the issue of parliamentary engagement, responding to Parliament's request and how it's involved with NPF2, there are amendments to the process for NPF3, and some of these are outlined in the participation statement. To the question, will Parliament have a say before its conclusion? Yes, it will. Of course, final decisions will rest with ministers, but members will have that ability to input to what the issues are. And what's helpful around that is a main issues report in the same way that we currently have main issues report in planning that present options rather than simply a fait accompli or a recommendation without the options. Put that into context also with the assessment matrix and the publishing of all national candidate bids that come forward. I think it will be a very transparent, open and engaging process. Specifically on planning fees, it is proposed that planning fees would be capped. It would still be, as proposed, at a lesser cost than is experienced in England, but would lever in finance to support planning authorities to be able to deliver the kind of planning service that they would want to deliver and we would expect. There must be a link, though, between planning fee costs and the application costs and the performance that's delivered. Now, it wouldn't be completely delivering cost recovery, but it would contribute much more to the planning fee system, and further detail can be found both in the March statement, the consultation, the responses of which they published online last week, and also the Better Regulation Bill consultation, which is also currently live in terms of how we would deliver that link. And in terms of impact upon business, we are proposing to deliver systems that take as much of the burden off of business as possible, but while still protecting the environment. And that's why many of the impact assessments are still necessary, but we want to deploy it in a proportionate way.
Jamie Hepburn, followed by Neil Findlay.
Presiding Officer, the Minister may be aware of the decision by North Lanarkshire Council not to grant permission for the construction of a new store in Motherwell last week, which would have led to hundreds of new jobs and a diversification of retail opportunities. Whilst the Minister can't comment on that specific application, can he say in any reform planning system how sacrosanct any local plan should be in the face of a specific application that would create hundreds of long-term new jobs and also act as a precursor for further investment elsewhere in any local authority area?
Minister.
Indeed, I cannot prejudge any planning application, but speaking in general terms, to support a plan-led system gives a great deal of power to local communities, ensuring that local plans reflect their wishes. We do support a plan-led system, but applications or decisions, determinations can depart from the zoning of a local plan if material considerations allow. Economic benefit would be one such material consideration. Therefore, in some circumstances, complete adherence to the local plan may not be delivered because of the circumstances that would lead you to another conclusion. In terms of Scottish planning policy, the review will be designed to support greater weighting, greater emphasis on economic benefit. Therefore, this kind of approach may give further support and strength to those wishing to secure sustainable economic growth in such areas.
Neil Findlay, followed by Alison Johnson.
I listened carefully to the Minister and I wrote down what he said. He said we want to see the process becoming more predictable and proportionate. Can he reassure me that he will not go down the route of the coalition government at Westminster, who want to introduce a planning free-for-all that's in danger of taking us back decades, if not centuries?
Minister.
I can assure the member and the whole chamber that whatever we do in respect to planning reform will be methodical, will engage stakeholders, will take the profession and local authorities with us, because it has to be delivered in partnership. And sometimes planning may be perceived to be a process of conflict between applicant and objector, but always it's partnership, it's a can-do approach. It's about enabling development, not necessarily being seen to stifle development. That said, whatever we do has to create places in which people want to live. It is also about protecting the environment. It's about ensuring processes are right and have been reviewed and delivered in a methodical way. That's exactly the process that I've undertaken as the Planning Minister, as outlined in March, and now taking forward a statement today and returning to further legislation. Crucially, I will of course watch carefully to what happens in any other part of the UK by way of planning reform, but we will take the best. I believe we have delivered much of the best reform in Scotland, both from the 2006 Planning Act and further refinement, but whatever we do will be delivered in a methodical way to support sustainable economic growth, not necessarily to grab headlines, but to deliver the kind of society in which we want to live.
Alison Johnson, to be followed finally by Duncan McNeill.
Thank you. I welcome the plans for greater clarity and transparency on how the national developments are proposed and finalised, and for targeted engagement with affected communities. Again, on the subject of parliamentary participation, can I ask the Minister if he will commit to bringing a government debate on the main issues report when it is published to allow Parliament to be consulted at this earlier stage? Thank you.
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I am delighted there is such enthusiasm from the Chamber today that they haven't quite had enough of me speaking about planning but want me to return to a future debate. I hear dissension from the Labour Party. I, of course, am more than happy to return to the Chamber to outline our vision for Scotland, how we will deliver a planning system fit for purpose and use every lever at our disposal to deliver sustainable economic growth.
Duncan McNeill.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. Given that I had two issues with National Planning Framework 2, one from a constituency basis, where we felt that we lost out unjustifiably in a matrix and a weighting and a decision-making process that was weighed against us in terms of offshore renewable construction, and as a convener of a committee who took evidence from many of the applicants to the National Planning Framework who lost out in that process. How can the Minister assure us that the process will be open, transparent and well understood to ensure the maximum amount of applications, to ensure the maximum amount of success and jobs here in Scotland?
Minister.
I gave the member the reassurance that we are trying to be as engaging as possible, putting more information in the public domain than ever before, being fully transparent as to how we will deliver this programme, and crucially that the participation will be evolving, it will be ongoing, so can adapt to circumstances to ensure that people feel that their voice is being heard. And if Mr McNeill would like to contribute to how I could further improve that, then I'm certainly interested in hearing from him.
The next item of business